Okay, so here is my life-changing machine that is great for me because I do not like cutting out pattern pieces. So this is the machine that I have. It's that ScanNCut SDX 225F. And like I mentioned in one of my posts, I got this one because I mostly got it for cutting out appliques for embroidery. I have 2 small children and I like to do appliques and everything for them. And this particular one can read PES files. You don't necessarily need that, of course, for cutting out pattern pieces, but it does need to be that if you're doing it for applique purposes. So that being said, you don't have to have this one. It's just the one that I have, but any of them would be able to do what I'm about to show you. So they come with a 12 by 12 mat, but you can buy a 12 by 24 mat. They're not that expensive. And obviously I have used mine a lot, especially just the last 24 hours. I've kind of gone crazy. But that's the 12 by 24 mat. And basically what I did, I bet if I did a PDF pattern, it would probably be easier. But basically this is what I did with a tissue pattern that I bought at my local store. So I bought my pattern and I was trying to cut out all my pieces. And like I said, I'm not all that great at it yet. And so I had a lot of trouble with my, first time consuming, and then also just getting my lining to match it with my fabric and just different things like that. So I knew I had this machine and I kept thinking it would be so really cool if I could get it to work for that purpose, but I just couldn't figure out how. I have a kid. My little girl's talking back there, so just overlook her. But anyway, so what I did is I drew out, of course, the pattern is half. So I drew out on each piece that I needed for this jumper. This is the bib on the pattern. But basically I drew it and then kind of did a mirror image on the other side. So I flipped it over because this is clear, or this is transparent pattern paper. So then I was able to draw it, and then I could draw it again on the top. So that way I would have a full image and not just a half with the cut on the fold. And so this is the bib piece. And like I said, I did this on, I think there's 5 different pieces that I needed. I need the bib, and I need the little loop for the straps. I need the strap pieces, which you need 4 of those, 2 facing one way, 2 facing the other. The waistband and the skirt pieces. Now, I did not do this on the skirt pieces only because they're literally rectangles. They're 2 very specific sizes. It's 11 by 19 and then 12 by 19. And since this is a 12 by 24 mat, it gets kind of difficult when they get close to filling out the space. So I just figured that would be easy enough to do that on my rotary cutter on my grid without having to worry about measuring up with the pattern piece. That way I could just cut it without having the pattern, since I know the dimensions and it's straight lines. So other than the skirt pieces, I did everything on the machine. And so, like I said, this is just one, and I would put several different ones on there together. Of course, I don't see it right now, but multiple ones would fit on this same sheet, and I'll show you on the screen in a minute. The straps, I did their own just because they took up most of the area. So basically, I did each piece like I did the bib and put them all over the mat. So then, when you turn on the machine, I saved it on the file. Now I'm going to put a whole nother video in a minute about how I did this, because it can be very tricky. Just because any little thing on this mat that you may not even be able to see in the naked eye picks up, and it throws off the scanning and cutting. So it's not as simple as just scanning the drawing and going about your business. That's why it would actually be easier with the PDF. But this is how I did it with the grid. So I drew it and I scanned it in the machine. And then what I actually had to do was save it to a USB and put it on the computer in the little program they have, and drew over it so that it was an exact line. Because if you do it by hand and it does it, even though it's pretty close, all the little squiggles and lines and everything pick up as a separate cut. So that's not ideal. So when I go back to the computer on the free software on there and just basically trace it on the computer, it's exact. So then when I save that on the machine to cut, this is what it looks like. So I retrieve the data, USB, because I saved it on there. And I made it its own file, so I knew all the pieces that I needed for that particular pattern would all be in one place. So I'm going to show you. So the straps are all on their own, and then everything else is on the other. So here's what the other one looks like that has the bib that I mentioned. I named it bib, waist, and loop because those are the pieces that are in this screen. So if you look, after I did it on the computer, now everything's not exactly a straight line because it's kind of hard to draw that on there, but it's good enough. It's better than I would be able to do cutting it by hand with a pattern, and probably even with a ruler, even though that would make it pretty straight. This is still, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's perfect for me. And it could be done better on the computer, but I was just so excited. I probably did it a little quick, but it works great. So anyway, so this is what it looks like on the screen. And you can see it's got the bib, the loop, the waist. And so what you do is you literally hit, so say you want to cut all three of those. Or for instance, if you do like I did earlier and you're making multiples, you can duplicate these. And I was able to fit 3 of each piece in a single mat. So you don't have to load them all on the mat. You can just go here with each one and then you can duplicate it on there and put 2, 3, 4, however many can fit in that window. And you do have to be careful, like someone mentioned about the grain line. So the waist that's going left to right would make more sense, you know, space-wise to go up and down, but it needs to go, the grain needs to go up and down horizontally, if that makes sense. Since it's going across, you don't want it to be different than what the grain is on the other pieces. So it has to go left to right if you're doing something with the grain or with a pattern that, you know, has a certain direction that it has to be. That being said, once you have all that kind of figured out, say you're just wanting to cut this one, you hit OK, and you have to load your mat, which, I mean, I can show you all that later, but basically the concept is you load this mat in the machine. And another thing that's kind of cool is if you scan it, you can actually go ahead and put your fabric, you know, you wouldn't have this on here. You would put your fabric on here and scan it, and then behind these images, it would have your fabric scanned on there. And then you can move these around to make sure that they're over the pieces of fabric that you want. So say you want a different fabric on these 3 pieces, you could do that all in one cut. You could cut your 3 separate pieces of fabric that you know would be big enough for those cuts and kind of place them on the mat, scan the mat with the fabric on it, and then move them around to be over the fabric that you want it to be cut on. So then when you're ready to cut, you just hit OK, you load your mat, please select, cut. And it's not letting me right now because I don't have the mat loaded, but you load the mat, and for me to cut out all 3 of these pieces for quantity, so 3 separate ones, so there would be 9 pieces total. So 3 bibs, 3 loops, 3 waistbands. It took less than a minute, and they're perfect. They're perfect cuts, and you don't have to do anything to it. You literally just peel it off of your mat and you're good to go. And so then I would turn around and do it with the lining. I did it with, you know, the interfacing, which, I mean, the interfacing is, to me, easier if you go ahead and iron it on the fabric beforehand. That way you don't have to cut it exact. But even still, you can iron it on your fabric and then cut them together. So you can use it in so many different ways. It is unbelievable, and it's so easy to do. And it does take just a little bit of time to get your files, you know, your patterns imported into the machine. But once you've done it, that's all you need. The only time you would need to redo the pattern on here is if you wanted to do a different size. Because when you go on the software, it keeps it the same size. Like when you're drawing, you scan in the image, and it keeps it the exact same size that it is when you scan it. So you know that it's going to be the right size when you cut it. So I know this is a lot longer of a video than I ever intended this to be, but it just has a lot of information. It's really, 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 like, I just can't explain how amazing it is. And in a minute, I'll take some pictures and everything to show the perfect cuts that it makes. And I can answer any other questions that you might have. Anyway, it's a game changer for me. Other people, I'm sure, say, it's quicker for them to just cut their pattern out, and they're great at that, and that's fine. And I'm sure, I'm not going to use this on everything, but if it's one of these that I have saved in here, yes. Or if it's something that I know that I want to make multiples of it, I know that my kids are going to wear that same style several times. I like it. I'm going to make more of them. Yes, I'm going to take the time to make the design. Now, I will say there are some pattern pieces, especially with bigger sizes, that are not going to fit on here. Like I tried to do some bloomers, a little diaper cover for my son, and the front pieces fit, but the back pieces were too wide to fit. So you kind of have to weigh out your options. Like, well, do I just want to cut all of them since I have to cut some by hand anyway? Just kind of like with the skirts here. Yeah, I'm cutting those myself, but they're straight lines. I don't have to worry about lining it up with a pattern. I know the dimensions, so that makes it easy for me. But anyway, so you just scan it, cut it, and everything lines up perfect. And I can do another video here in a minute of an actual example of scanning the fabric and what it looks like on the screen, and also how quickly it cuts all of those pieces. Because I'm sure I have more fabric I'd like to use for the same pattern. I already have 3 in the works right now, but what's one more, right? So yeah, y'all let me know if you have questions. Obviously, I'm a huge fan, and yeah, y'all have a good day.